Husband tricked me after years of lies he claims aren't lies, and I don't know what's real anymore. My husband and I am 33, have been married for 11 years. I would describe our relationship for the majority of that time as wonderful. Important background info is that we are first world, lower middle class, and I am physically disabled, including chronic disabling pain. My daughter F2 inherited my disorder and is in physical therapy and fairly high needs. When we had our first baby 4 years ago, things were harder than ever, but we were happier than ever. When we had our daughter 2 years ago, things got messy. I had an extremely bad pregnancy, was ridiculous sick preeclampsia, eclampsia being the main issue, nearly died, my placenta failed, and though a haze of being so out of it that I couldn't seem to understand the words people were saying to me. I had a last-minute emergency C amongst other things and ended up with nerve damage. My heart and lungs weren't working at full power. The birth was the second most extreme form of a modern C-section, and I'd gained a massive amount of weight from all the meds, complications, and bed rest which had put strain in an already decimated body. My baby was born very small because of my but otherwise seemed healthy. In the month following all that, I was emotionally exhausted. I'd been forced to agree to a sterilization procedure because another pregnancy would kill me, so I had all the trauma, the normal postpartum stuff, and the loss of fertility to deal with. Plus my baby screamed all day and most nights. She had horrible reflux and screamed more than she didn't. I cried more than I didn't. It was horrible. In that time my husband was not very emotionally supportive but still a good partner otherwise, but I soon realized I was drowning and needed more support. I was carrying the lion's share of the household chores and child care. My husband did the overnights and most of our laundry, which was lovely, but during the day I was carrying 100% of the mental load and much of the general physical load. I started begging for help. He pushed back but inevitably caved, helped more for a while, then went back to old habits. I would beg for more help and more emotional support, and we'd start the cycle again. Eventually he said no. He felt he did enough and it was my job. I told him I'd caught myself thinking about driving into a tree and I needed more support. He told me he was tired too. Then one day he sat me down and gave me a long lecture about how he'd gone to our pastor and psych with all of my abusive demands and that they agreed I was in the wrong. The psych told him to pack his bags and threatened to leave if I didn't shape up, and the pastor decided I must be turned into a radical feminist by internet influences and had determined to pray the demons out of me. He admitted that he wasn't okay with either of their positions but felt they supported his stance that my behavior was not okay. I made him lay it all out for me, everything he had told them I was doing, and in the end he admitted he had blown it out of proportion in his head and most of it was minor, not fair, or straight up not real. He cried and said that he had gone to the psychologist for help because he wasn't coping and was burned out, and the psych convinced him I was in the wrong and needed to push back. Once I explained my position, he said he was embarrassed and ashamed. On this particular day, I was 1 month postpartum. It's been 2.5 years. We went to marriage counseling. They asked us to send an explanation of what was going on in our eyes. I sent her the above story with all the details, my failings, his failings, everything. My husband read it and admitted it was fair and accurate, and even leaned a little towards being too generous towards him. I even included that he is a good and kind man and shared how wonderful a dad he is, etc. He sent her a laundry list of everything he doesn't like about me and everything he thinks I'm doing wrong. Some of them were true, some of them were missing bits, details that changed the story. She screamed at me when the actual story was she found out I had lied to people, told them horrible things about her that weren't true, had a panic attack and screamed at me. The truth does not negate my failing, but he excluded every detail that painted him poorly or explained my mistakes in any way, and even included straight-up lies. She spends all of your money on plants and asks me for money every week, and is destroying us financially when in reality I had spent $0 of our money on plants and had asked him for money, at his own behest, roughly 5 to 7 times in 4 years. All the while he shared this laundry list of my failings and every mistake I made along the way with an unknown number of people, my brother, his parents, friends, etc. I begged him to stop calling my brother after fights and telling him twisted, one-sided versions of the fights that made me look horrible and him like an innocent victim, but he told me he deserved to have someone to talk to and it didn't matter how I felt or that it was destroying my relationship with my family. I sobbed and begged him to stop and pick someone else and he said no. In our first appointment, he surprised me by saying that he had been unhappy for most of our marriage because he had been giving me whatever he thought I wanted to avoid fights or having to talk things out, and that he was tired of never getting what he wanted and was done picking me. I had not known he was doing that and had been making choices and suggestions based on what I thought would work for both of us or letting him get what he appeared to want, so in reality, he hadn't actually been giving me what I wanted anyway. Since then he will agree with me in private and then deny it when it no longer suits him and makes promises or commitments but then goes back on it when I'm not looking. He insists this isn't lying, just telling me what he thinks I want to hear. I was seeing a private psych to deal with diagnosed CPTSD from the pregnancy birth. They suggested that my husband needed to rebuild trust. She asked him to make a short-term sacrifice and commit to not telling anyone the private details of our marriage. To anyone, including professionals, without me present and consenting, short of real abuse, of course, until we had a chance to do counseling together and rebuild trust so I could feel safe in our relationship. He agreed and promised, and with that promise I agreed to try couples therapy again. This weekend we arrived at a session and he announced that I would be seeing one of the counselors. There's two of them alone. It had been brought up in past sessions but I hadn't agreed to it. I was floundering and said, "But what about you?" Very confused, and he said, "I'll be with the other one." I struggle with confrontation and just fawned. I sat and fought, crying in a panic attack while I tried to process that he'd just blindsided me. Afterwards, I asked why he had tricked, manipulated me, and broken his promise, and he insisted he didn't. That he just didn't tell me and he shouldn't have made the promise to begin with, and that he deserves to be able to talk about me and what I'm doing, saying, and that's more important. And he insists that it wasn't deceitful to secretly organize the appointments, take me knowing I was expecting a normal group session, and then tell me as we were walking in so I wouldn't be able to say no. He says I'm manipulating him by saying don't trust him and that he hasn't lied, he's just had a different perspective or changed his mind or not meant things or felt like he had to say them, etc. I know that's a lot, but is he right and I'm being manipulative and blowing things out of proportion? I don't think I am, but I feel like I'm going crazy. TL, doctor. Married 10 years, had 2 kids, pregnancy nearly killed me and crippled me. Husband didn't think he needed to help more, but I was falling apart due to pregnancy, birth trauma, and physical disability and begged for more help. He said nasty things and lied about me and told people half the story, which made me look bad whilst forgetting the parts of the stories that explained my behavior or made him look bad. Talked about me behind my back to a bunch of family and friends. Went to therapy where he just complained about everything he doesn't like about me and admitted he had been telling me what he thinks I want to hear for 10 years to avoid having to talk things out. Psychologist asked him to commit to not talking to anyone, including a professional, for a while about us while we go to couple counseling until we can rebuild enough trust for me to feel safe that he won't lie about me again. He broke that promise by manipulating, tricking me into going into separate sessions with our counselors so he could talk about me, thus to one of our counselors without me there.